Have you been an F1 fan since you were a kid?
Yes, yeah. So basically, a sports fan.
Yes,
like
okay.
wide sports fan.
Yeah, same, basically.
TV always on, watching sports.
Yeah.
And whatever was on, I would love to watch.
Yeah.
But back then, it was BBC. So it was easy access. I just grew up to the dulcet tones of Murray Walker. I always remember him sort of, I think Nigel Mansell took a bump to the head and him sort of prodding that bump, I don't know, that sticks into my head, and just generally being slightly a buffoon, but a great commentator. And I kind of grew up on that. Was it the same for you?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess we're a similar age, aren't we?
I'm afraid I'm older, but I look maybe younger. I'm not sure.
It's an incredibly young face, but it's confusing. Grey hair, young face. I don't know what to make of it. But yeah, same. Murray Walker, sort of my favourite or sort of most sort of locked in memories are all from kind of Prost, Senna, those kind of battles. And actually, if you just say to me, the like Murray Walker line that most sticks in your mind is when the famous crash in Japan between Prost and Senna, and Murray Walker's so excited by it, and he just goes, "This is fantastic," and then immediately sort of goes, "They're both," and sort of that doesn't exactly like corrects himself, but sort of thinks, maybe I shouldn't. I mean, they just crashed, so maybe not fantastic, but it's just like
that was the utter fan in him. He just couldn't help himself.
He could not help himself. Like, of course, it's fantastic, but as the commentator, you're probably not supposed to say that exactly. Hello and welcome to The Inside Track, the new Formula One podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the biggest stories in the sport with exclusive, amazing access to Red Bull racing. I'm broadcaster and Formula One fan Rick Edwards.
And I'm sports journalist Matt Majendie. Now each week we break down the latest F1 news, the backstage gossip, which driver's thriving and who's under the most pressure.
This season we are going to get up close and very personal with Red Bull as they battle to try and retain their standing as the fastest team on the planet. It is going to be a battle this season, isn't it?
Yeah, like in theory, and the first race has helped sort of add to that. This should be the most exciting season. If last season seemed good and compelling, this one even more so. So you've got Max Verstappen going for a fifth straight Drivers' Championship. Only Michael Schumacher's done that before.
And he was decent.
Yeah, he was pretty nifty. And you've got the McLarens, who on paper right now, they are the quickest. They're, possibly the strongest driver partnership, you might say, out there, of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. You've got, as I said, Verstappen with a new guy into the team in Liam Lawson, so that's quite an exciting mix. You've then, for the first time ever, you've got Lewis Hamilton not in a Mercedes-powered car for Ferrari, alongside Charles Leclerc. Again, a great driver partnership. While they weren't amazing in Australia, they're going in the right direction. That should be exciting. And then you've got Mercedes, who've got a lovely mix of George Russell, now sort of the number one.
Experienced old head.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. He is, because he's been there so long, even though he's young. And Kimi Antonelli, who is so exciting. Seems like a sweet little kid. He's only just passed his driving test in the lead up to the season. And all of that added together, there's four teams capable of vying for race wins, for the constructors, for the Drivers' Championship. So, it should be fantastic.
It's partly a function of my age, but when I went to the big Formula One 75 launch event, when you sit down and talk to some of the drivers, whether it's Antonelli or Behrman, it's like, my God, these are literally children.
Yeah.
This is a child driving a Formula One car. It's mad.
Well, that's interesting. Christian Horner said it the weekend, because Isaac Hadjar, who for the sister team of Red Bull, he crashed on the before the race even started, and he looked distraught. And he said, "Well, you've got to remember, these guys are kids, and you cut them some slack." Helmut Marko less so. The motorsport consultant for the team said it was embarrassing. I thought it was a bit rough on him.
The guy's had a little cry
I
under
know,
his visor.
Bless him.
Be kind.
Yeah. Anyway, so you can see they are just kids, but they have an amazing ability. I mean, there's some really talented young kids and rookies on the grid. Not all of them did brilliantly at the weekend, but they will do in time.
Tough weekend, actually.
Weekend, yeah.
So the question that I really need to ask you is, how have you got this access to Red Bull?
Yeah,
because
mad, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it is, and I'm almost slightly suspicious. Like, what have you got? What are you leveraging here? Yeah.
Well, basically, I worked as sports journalist for the Evening Standard, and as I was covering the F1, and I came up with an idea that I would like to do something a bit more in depth with the team, and I pitched this idea of inside the winning machine. So what they did is they allowed me to come to Milton Keynes, where their factory is, after a race and be there for the team debrief, and they'd never let a journalist inside before. So to see that, so I got to speak to Christian Horner and Adrian Newey, seemed to speak to the team, and then Max Verstappen came up on this big screen looking worse for wear, it has to be said. He just won the championship, I think, and he'd revealed he'd had 5 double gin and tonics. It looked more. Those eyes said maybe double that. Yeah. So I did that piece, and it was really good how open they were, and I think readers loved the piece, and actually I think Red Bull really enjoyed the piece. So then sometime later I just sort of ate away at me. There was more there. It was just like I just sort of tasted it and suggested it.
But you gained their trust, clearly.
Yeah, I think there's a trust there. You know, they've been comfortable if I've written positive and negative stories. They understand it's not, you know, this is not beautifully bubble wrapped and everything's jolly. Yeah, they understand that you know, the roller coaster of Formula One on and off the track. There's so much to it. But they said yes to it, and it's unbelievable. You know what I asked for, they are saying yes to, and the things they're offering as well. It's really exciting. I still can't believe it's a bit of pinch yourself every now and again. But
I mean, I can't believe it, and I'm really happy that I get to piggyback it. So what are your plans for this season then? Are you going to go to every race? Are you going to be back at their HQ some of the time?
It's a bit of a mix, yeah. So we did opening race, first race of the season. There's going to be ones where we're inside the factory. So what you see at the racetrack, if you're watching on TV, you'll see mechanics in the garage, you'll see the people on the pit wall, there are other people in a engineering office there, but that's just a small part of it. Back into the operation, there's like there's this operations room back in the factory of 50 people with headsets on, these sort of utter whizzes going through, you know, minutiae. So being able to feed into that and hear how they're, you know, passing information from there onto the track in real time. So you kind of see there's so many more moving parts than just what you see race engineer chatting to driver or whatever else.
So you got to Melbourne at some point last week. I mean, it's hard with the time difference.
Yeah, so I got up on Monday morning and I went to Red Bull, to their factory beforehand, just to extend my day, and got like the team briefing before the season started. So Horner chatting to everyone, so everyone comes in this
so
amazing
how many people
room.
are in there?
Well, there's 1,750 people work for Red Bull in total. Now, not all of them are in the F1 operation. There's Red Bull Advanced Technology, so they create things of like bikes for leading teams, lots of different things like that. So I don't know, but this was a full room, but it was like a look at what we've won kind of room. All these cars in like a semicircle, all these amazing cars. So I did that, then went to the airport, and ridiculously then landed at 9 a.m. on Wednesday in Australia, having gone via Malaysia. But because of the way things have been set up, they'd invited me to go to something straight away. So I went straight to the Yarra River, where Liam Lawson and Max Verstappen were doing like this fans meet and greet thing. So chatting on a stage, answering questions, David Coulthard, lots of weird and wonderful things. And suddenly, you know, there I was in 25, 30 degrees sunshine, and then the journey back. So it was a fair old stint to go, but it was well worth it.
Okay, so we're going to have a look.
I'm already shaking my head. I know what's coming.
Already sweating a bit.
Our body language is terrible.
I know. Yeah, arms folded.
Okay, I'm very relaxed about this.
So before each race, we are going to predict the podium. So first, second and third. And we'll get a point for each of the drivers who make up the top 3. So 3 points up for grabs. But if we get the order exactly right, and that is quite a big if, we win 6 points.
Oh, wow.
And we're not only competing against each other, there is a third competitor, which is you, the listener, the viewer. You can submit your predictions by checking out our Instagram stories. Just search for @theinsidetrack_podcast. Each week we'll pick one prediction to represent the audience, and because this is our first show, we have enlisted artificial intelligence to pick for the audience. So let's have a look at AI's prediction first. So the AI went with Lando Norris first, Max Verstappen second, Charles Leclerc third. So that would give the AI 2 points.
Pretty good.
Decent start. And I think it's safe to say we haven't really given the machine a run for its money. So do you want to do your predictions first?
Yes. So I went for Lando Norris to win.
Very good.
1 point.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Pat on the back. Charles Leclerc second.
Pat your own back.
Well, no,
I'll give you a pat on the back.
It was a strong start because it goes downhill from here, you see. Charles Leclerc in second, and third place I had Oscar Piastri.
Yes.
How did that go? Yeah.
Do you know what? There's a similarity to mine. Lando first, pat on the back.
Yeah.
Good start. Then I had Piastri second.
You were nearly there.
Not so good. And then, now look, I went with Hamilton third, but hear me out.
Yeah.
But so we both sort of thought that the Ferraris would do better than they did.
I did think they would be better.
So
they didn't have a great race.
And then I think I went with my heart rather than my head. Yeah. I just thought, wouldn't it be lovely?
But I think he was always going to struggle to even be the quicker Ferrari.
All right.
Hate to be all sensible.
I just, the romantic
I love
in
it.
me thought,
why not?
They might just pull something out. And it's Lewis. You know.
Well, we both got a race winner. I mean, maybe it wasn't the boldest prediction.
I think everyone was predicting that. So, yeah, and I don't know. It became pretty clear. I mean, I guess even from qualifying that.
Yeah, they were
Hamilton
a step behind.
Was not going to be troubling the podium too much. Although he did lead very briefly, but it was clear it was only going to be very, very brief. So that means you got 1 point, I got 1 point, and the AI representing the audience got 2 points.
It's not a great start.
It's not, and it sort of fuels this idea that we're all going to get replaced by AI because it's better than us. Annoying.
Let's see how the fans do against us. Maybe we'll be more respectful against them. I don't know.
I mean, probably not. That'd be my guess. It was a pretty mental race.
Yeah, it was amazing,
actually.
Wasn't it?
And or the kind of race that if you were going to say to someone who'd never watched Formula One,
check this out.
This is the kind of thing you can get, and it's really exciting and also sort of mad at times. And there will be little lulls,
and then mayhem would then ensue again.
Where you can kind of just relax for a bit, and then chaos. To the extent that it's sort of hard to know where to start. I mean, I guess that Norris did a really, really
that was impressive.
Solid job.
Yeah.
You have to say that.
And he was in trouble when in the wet. You know, he sort of went off and nearly spun like Piastri did, and then he was under immense pressure from Verstappen at the end and held firm. Like that was, you know, it was his race to lose, I guess would be fair to say.
Yes.
But under immense pressure and in very difficult circumstances, he did a great job. I thought.
And you probably say that last season under that pressure, he might not have held firm.
Yeah, I think he answered some questions. It'd be interesting to see if he carries on that way because he'll be under pressure from his teammate.
Well, wait until you hear my predictions.
Okay.
And then on the rest of the podium, Verstappen, when I look back at my predictions, it's sort of ridiculous that I didn't imagine that Verstappen would still.
Yeah, but if you look at the way, because I made my predictions maybe a bit late. I made it after practice, and they were awful. Like they were really struggling with the balance of the car, and the pace wasn't there. And then their ability as a team to get that right, and his ability to pull it out when it matters, so impressive. Like to do what he did in qualifying, to be there, and then to be where he was in the race was. Yeah, I think he was closer to McLaren than perhaps people had initially thought,
and maybe than he had initially thought as well. Like he's obviously aware that
if you'd asked him at the start of the weekend, you're going to finish the race second, I think
he would have bitten your hand off.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, anyone on the team would have gone for that.
But you can't. The thing with him, it's just a reminder. You absolutely cannot write him off.
Yeah, and as soon as it's wet, as soon as weather comes into play, he is such a talent. There are some drivers who are better in the wet than others, but I think was it Brazil last year when he came from 17th. It's just amazing what he is able to do. Helmut Marko called it the max factor, and it's really true. He has an ability that other drivers don't.
Yeah, it'd be interesting looking at. I mean, we'll look ahead more shortly, but to see what the conditions are like in China.
I was looking at the forecast. It's pretty sunny and dry and hot, probably, 25 sort of. Yeah, so I don't think there's going to be that element. Yeah.
You suspect it'll give you a better idea of where an early idea anyway of where all the cars are at, because this race sort of feels like it was so chaotic. Well,
Australia's always hard to get a proper take. It's just, it can be a bit of an anomaly race. Red Bull Verstappen's never done brilliantly there. I mean, he has not done as well as probably you would expect him to. So it can be a bit of an odd race. I don't know. We'll get more of a sense as obviously the races go on, but China will probably be a better, give us a better sense of the lay of the land and the pecking order.
Other than the podium finishers, probably the standout for me is Kimi Antonelli coming fourth.
Yeah, if you think about the other rookies, obviously all crashed out or had some sort of mayhem during the course of the weekend, And he pulled off some unbelievably ballsy overtakes. That's when we talk about the sort of superstar. When they pull off moves like that, you're like, wait a second, that's impressive. And yeah, he was the most, he was the sort of star of it. I know he didn't make the podium, but to finish where he did was so impressive on his debut. But I really was pleased and surprised with Alex Albon. Obviously, they've shown pace in winter testing, but such a likeable guy, and really nice to see Williams. People often say that's everyone's, if it's not your team, it's your second favourite team, because there's such a good will behind that team with its history, everything it was from the inception with Frank Williams, and that was lovely to see as well. I was super impressed.
Also, again, people our age, you just immediately think Nigel Mansell.
Yeah, that's also that.
And you think, I mean, amazing for George Russell, if he's listening. Hello, George. That he didn't even really get a mention, even though he came third. Not to say that your teammate overshadowed you, even though he didn't beat you, but he sort of did in a way, because we expect George to race well. And the thing about Alex Albon and the Williams that occurred to me is, obviously, Carlos Sainz didn't finish, but you suspect that he will be able to do very well in that Williams when he does finish a race. I
mean, they've got an unbelievably good driver partnership. There's been a lot of years in the doldrums. Really good. I mean, Sainz was such a coup. I was watching the Drive to Survive episode of them the other day, of them, James Vowles, and how they got him to sign and stuff. And there was a lot of people going for him, and he was in the conversation for different teams to join, and they've done brilliantly to do that. Yeah. I didn't think they'd necessarily be as good as this. I sort of got the sense that they would maybe give up a little bit on this season. That sounds terrible, and focus more on 2026 already, but they've started brilliantly.
And this is because of the regulation change that is coming in 2026.
Yep, exactly right. 2026, massive regulation changes, new power units, everything changes, so it sort of rips up the current rule book. So teams have to make a decision at what point they start turning some attention, all attention, 2026. So what that means is you might get midfield teams or backmarker teams who will not write off entirely the season, but would
they're focusing on that.
Yeah. Because if you get next year wrong, then you get the next few years wrong, because before there's another regulation change. But what is compelling is that the top four teams that we mentioned at the very start, who you'd think, on paper will be in the championship mix, and they're such competitors, they'll want to push that for the whole of the season. So what does that mean for 2026?
Maybe slightly less prepared, and
do we suddenly have Aston Martin or Williams getting the jump on the big boys, as it were? It's quite a compelling kind of interesting dynamic of how that will play out. But
Ferrari had, but by any measure, really a poor weekend. We predicted them to be on the podium with different drivers, and they were nowhere near.
No, they struggled for pace. It was just, there was a head scratching. They didn't make great pit stop calls necessarily as well, but both. I mean, Hamilton was like, it wasn't a good day at the office sort of thing, and couldn't get a handle on the car. I think he struggled. But Leclerc, who's established in the team, knows how the car works. It'd be interesting to see how they go in China. Maybe that was just a one-off, a bad circuit for them.
No. And you sort of feel it's a worse weekend for Charles Leclerc than it is for
I think so.
Liz for Lewis, because
even though he finished higher up, but he was
but you want more from a guy who knows the car.
But then you've got to remember, McLaren were dreadful at the start of last season. They were really struggling for pace. Their winter testing wasn't good, and they were then the quickest cars. So it is amazing how quickly that can change.
But that turnaround is remarkable.
Yeah, really astonishing.
But you don't see that often.
No, it doesn't.
To be
but
fair.
they unlocked some potential. They always said the potential was there in the car, and they did it. I mean, it was amazing. So maybe, we'll see with Ferrari. It'd be nice to see them in the mix as well.
This is basically why I had him in my prediction, because it would be nice. So let's talk about Red Bull's weekend then. Christian Horner has called this Red Bull's biggest year, which I think, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you would measure that particularly. I don't know why he thinks this is their biggest year.
Maybe because they're more under threat than ever before. So I know they didn't win the constructors, but they still won the drivers. So it was a success, and they were under immense pressure, and they didn't have the quickest car in that latter part of the season, and yet it's very impressive that Verstappen pulled that off and held firm. So I think it's that big test, because the challenge is greater than ever. Their rivals are out to get them. There's always that sort of feeling out to get. If you're the target, you're the number one. They're after that. So
I always get the feeling that Red Bull like having that target on their back, like they sort of relish that.
Yeah, I think they thrive on that. But similarly, they if they're in the doldrums and they have fallen behind and playing catch up, they love that as well. They're such intense competitors, so incredibly competitive. Horner, very much so, and he sort of sets that tone for the rest of the team.
I was going to say, how much of that comes from Christian Horner?
Yeah, I think immensely so. Interestingly, I know he's now left the team, but Adrian Newey was fiercely competitive. So the two of them together. Who was it? I was chatting to someone who would describe Newey as the most competitive man they'd ever met.
Wow.
And so having those two as the head honcho. So it'd be interesting to see with Newey then having moved to Aston Martin, whether that changed the dynamic. I don't think so. I think, for different reasons it might, but that competitiveness is now so inherent and so ingrained into everyone. It doesn't matter who you are on that team. And there's such a collective us versus them thing within Red Bull. As I'm sure it's the same with other teams. It's us against the rest of them. And I really like that collective, almost family feel. Like when I said I went to that briefing before going away, and then when you're at the race, you feel that family, this wider travelling crazy family that go out together and try and win these races. And I don't think that competition, that competitiveness is tailing off.
How did Red Bull feel about their weekend overall, would you say?
I think they were pretty positive. If you had gone to them and said one of your drivers is going to finish second, they'd be, I think, that's great, because
they probably would have known which one as well.
That's true. I think they felt hard. It was a tough weekend for Liam Lawson. He had an issue with his power unit in practice, and in qualifying, actually, he looked like he was going to go through, and then made one mistake, and it shows. And that cost him. He didn't get out of Q1. But the reason I think they're so positive is that they weren't quick enough. They weren't as quick as McLaren, but they were closer to McLaren than they've been at winter testing. So they've already closed that gap. But they also are pleased that the RB20, last season's car, was a bit of a handful. It was like it just wasn't as easy a car to drive. Now the RB21 already looks more balanced. It's easier to drive, which sounds ridiculous, when they go at 200 miles an hour, but it is an easier car to drive. It's got a better balance. And now from that set balance, they've got a good solid platform. And they know they haven't extricated all the speed from it. So the more is to come. So I think they're excited about that. They were talking how, I think in 3 to 5 races' time, they've got some quite big upgrades coming. And I think there is a sense, they'd like to show their rivals they are going to get quicker.
Did they get all of their strategy calls right?
I think they perhaps left Verstappen out for a lap too long, but they did the sort of number crunching.
Did you say that to them?
Yes, they got me into the engineering debriefing. Just one of my insights. No,
you just screaming box.
No, I think by their own admission they were probably a lap too late. But what's interesting is when they crunched the numbers, I don't think it would have made a difference to the results. So I think they're pretty happy with all the calls they made.
You spoke to Liam Lawson before the race.
Yeah, they've been really impressed by him. Horner talked about having to sort of wrestle him out of the simulator. He's so wanting to, because he's not a rookie necessarily. I think he's done 11 races, but a lot of the circuits he's never driven. So Australia, he'd never driven there before, and there was a few others like that. So he's been in the simulator a lot, trying to get himself as prepared as possible. What I was very impressed by was in Bahrain. You'd expect it from Max Verstappen, listening into the race radio, and the feedback from Verstappen is incredible, of the things, just slight tweaks to the car. But Lawson's was incredibly in-depth, very mature for such a young guy. And the other aspect I found interesting was how he spoke after his crash in the race. He was a really mature response. It was a mea culpa, hands up, I messed it up. But there's a real belief in him that he can help the team get back into the battle in the constructors. Even though he's a young driver, they talk about him. He's not afraid to get his elbows out on the racetrack. We'll see a different side to him. And I do hope that China goes better. I'm sure it will. It was just one of those just weekends where things just don't click.
But will they have set him any targets, particularly?
I mean, if they have, I don't know them. I would think they want him to be there or thereabouts to Max Verstappen. They don't expect him to be mixing it with a 4-time world champion. But if Verstappen's finishing second, they would like him to be somewhere in the points.
Yes.
The more points they can bring home, the better. With Checo Perez, last season, he wasn't doing enough of that.
No.
It was, as I said, a pig of a car, and it was suited better to the driving style of Verstappen with this sort of pointy front end, which didn't suit Perez so well. But, they wanted two drivers to come back.
I'm in class here. Pointy front ends.
So basically the car, he wants the car, he doesn't mind if the car's like aggressive.
Yeah.
So if it's pointing into the corner and the back's coming out, he has the skill and the ability to control that car He's just very good at that.
Yeah.
Now, some other drivers like a much smoother car.
Mm.
Jenson Button famously always used to talk about that. I think Prost was that sort of type of driver. But actually, Lawson, what I was told, quite likes the car in that direction, which helps if two drivers are
of a similar mind.
Yeah, similar mindset. So it helps in the direction you go. But if I go back to the point on Perez, he wasn't getting points at all.
No.
You know, Verstappen might be struggling in a race to 4th or 5th, but Perez would be 14th. So if they can have Lawson consistently getting points, that would be the main thing.
So who are you going to be hanging out with across this season then? And who have you met already?
So what's quite fun is I don't really know. Like that's sort of, I know some of it, but not some of it.
Whoever you tap on the shoulder
yeah,
next.
so hello, will you
What are
speak
you
to me?
doing?
What's your job? But basically, I wanted to do it that it's a bit more in depth. So we know the star names of this team. We know the Horners, Verstappen's, Lawson, and obviously they'll be integral to this and the whole season. But it's also getting to know different characters. I talked about Pierre Vacher. I talked about Hannah Schmitz. I've managed to speak to her, Giampiero Lambiesi, superb name, nickname GP, which you've got to love. And then I've got to know some of the mechanics. There's John and Matt Kaller, and they're twin brothers, and they're the number one, the lead mechanic for rival teams within the garage. So one for Verstappen, one for Lawson.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
So these are, I feel like I've just got a sense of some of these characters, and there'll be more. And I already know all of these people I've mentioned. I'm going to kind of revisit, and they're going to keep on being there. But there's so many others. I'll tell more when I've spoken to them.
Did the twins both join at the same time?
Oh no! So one was already there, and they were looking for another mechanic. And they literally go, they tell this story beautifully. They go, do you know of anyone? He's like, well, actually, yes, I do.
Funny you should ask.
And he looks quite similar. And they love telling that story. And they're quite hard to tell apart. But there's people within the team still do not tell them apart, which they find hilarious.
Who's better? Is that sore point?
Now, I don't know the answer to that.
Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah. They say they're competitive brothers. They will each other on, but they want to be better than the other one, I think. So, yeah, we'll find out during the course of the season.
Now, obviously, we can't pretend that Red Bull had an easy time off the track last season.
Yeah.
Like, there was all sorts going on.
Yeah, it was a busy time for them, and I wrote quite a lot about it when I was
Busy is a good word.
working for the Evening Standard. Yeah, there was a lot of controversy. It was a tough season for them on and off track. We've talked about Newey leaving. We talked about Verstappen being under pressure, but there was an internal investigation at Red Bull towards team principal Christian Horner. Now he was cleared of any wrongdoing, but that was a big backdrop to the start of the season. So there was a lot of noise, negative noise around the team there.
Yeah, and then you had all of this seeming friction between him and then Jos Verstappen, Max's dad. That appears to all have kind of settled down now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to tell unless you're there, but, seeing how they interacted in Bahrain, Jos was there in Bahrain, that seemed an amicable relationship, feels like things have moved on. He wasn't there at the race, but, the peace reigns at Red Bull, and they're all, together, collective, going in the right direction now to continue being a championship-winning team.
I guess also it's just partly you've got this huge organisation and all of these people and a lot of big personalities. There are going to be times when you have politics and fallouts to deal with, inevitably.
I think in competition it happens. I enjoyed talking to Pierre Vacher when I asked him what he was like as a boss. He said, I'm really quite shouty. He's not afraid that people are not afraid to raise their voices and for tough words to be said. You don't become the very best at something, whether that's elite sport or whatever, without some friction and cross words. So that you see it. I mean, if we talk about Drive to Survive, you see the tensions between the team bosses like Christian Horner and Zak Brown. That plays out, and Zak Brown admitted, that is true. That sort of friction between them, and that's what makes Formula One compelling. That there can be friction between teams, and there can be friction within teams.
I love a bit of needle.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of it this season, I think.
So you're going to be spending a lot of time with Red Bull this season, travelling a lot, because the F1 is obviously one of the most global sports. I imagine that you are a well-travelled and cultured man.
Well-travelled, yeah.
Yes.
Cultured.
Sorry, what did I say?
Cultured is generous.
I just
meant
well-travelled, yeah. So we want to make sure that you are prepared for all of the destinations that you're going to. And in service of that, producer Nick taught you some Australian phrases
which I have, thankfully.
that you clearly haven't remembered because you've pulled them all out.
Well, you wait, they're quite complex.
We want you to use them in any interviews that you might carry out for us. I think that's ambitious because you've only ever got 2 minutes with these people, and if you start bringing these,
can I open with this?
But I'm going to go through the list because I don't think I know any of these. What does flat out like a lizard drinking mean?
Someone is very busy, working really hard.
Oh, so everyone?
Yeah.
Basically
everyone.
Formula
One.
Yeah, Formula One. They're all flat out like lizards drinking.
I should be able to get that one in.
Yeah, although don't now do it in China.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work now, does it?
Well, we'll find some for you in
Could
Mandarin.
do it to Piastri or an Australian.
What about, I think I know this one, or I can work it out. Mad as a cut snake.
You're going to guess?
I'm just angry.
Yeah.
I'm figuring if I
very
cut a snake,
superly angry. Yeah, off the scale
it's
angry.
seething. He's got a few roos loose in the top paddock.
Yeah.
That feels like mad as a box of frogs to me.
Well, a bit crazy, or not the sharpest tool in the box, that sort of thing as well.
Okay,
double there, I think.
What about you wouldn't be dead for quids?
Yeah, that's mental, isn't it? It means life is great and you wouldn't trade it for anything. So Lando Norris, you might say that to Lando Norris perhaps after he'd won. He'd won the race.
Well, I'm not going to say it to him. You're going to say it to him.
Might not say it to a Fernando Alonso or Carlos Sainz after how their weekend went.
Alonso, you expect better from him.
Yeah,
really.
no, I do.
As useful as an ashtray on a motorbike?
Something or someone that's completely useless.
Yeah, so that sort of chocolate teapot type thing. Cactus.
I like this. Yeah, but it's just broken, not working, or exhausted.
So how would I'd say I'm absolutely cactus.
Yeah, it would. At the end of that week, God, that was a long weekend. I'm cactus.
I'm cactus.
On your cactus.
That's actually
Let's hope to get a bit of sleep in.
That's the only one that I might take so far. And that's your lot. I assume that you didn't use any of those.
You assumed correctly.
Yes.
Okay, in my defence...
I don't think you need to defend it.
Well, I just want to say, but this is my first time with the team at a race, and I didn't want to start hitting the cactus and roos loose in a paddock with my first interview with Christian Horner or Liam Lawson. So I had a bad start with dropping those
Christian,
in.
would you say you were a few roos loose in the top paddock? Or
I think maybe he'd be game for it.
Yeah.
Give it a go next time.
I think he might be. So the next race on the Formula One calendar is this Sunday, 23rd of March. It's in Shanghai, the Shanghai International Circuit in China, and we're expecting it to be quite a different race to what we've seen in Melbourne. You assume, we mentioned the fact that the forecast is it's going to be quite warm and dry. Mm-hmm. You assume it's going to be quite a different race.
Yeah, I think what you saw when it was in the dry, McLaren's were better because they were able to make their tyres last, and I think that'll be even more pertinent in Shanghai. So other teams and other drivers, their tyres were going wrong, and you could see the blistering. You could hear on the race radio people complaining about grip, and you could see how the cars are slipping in and out. McLaren seemed to do that very well, and you would think that tyre degradation will be more of an issue in China. I don't know for sure. So I kind of think that it might show McLaren's current advantage a bit more in Shanghai than we saw in Melbourne.
Are you off to Shanghai or are you back at HQ?
No, so I'm going to go. Yeah, I got a message about this. So the person I'm going to meet said they'll be arriving at 3:45 in the morning on Sunday at Rach HQ. I said I wouldn't probably be quite that early, but basically it's a 7 a.m. start.
I think
this is a normal time for you getting up in the morning.
Exactly.
This is standard.
I think you need to be there at 3:45.
I'll see you there.
Yeah.
But
to be clear, they haven't invited me.
But yeah, basically I'm going to be inside the race operation. So this big room, massive screens. I've been in it, but it was empty. And everyone will be sitting there, about 50 desks worth of people plugged into radio, and you'll hear everything that's happening. So Will Courtney's going to be my go-to, like the strategist, the one I said shares with Hannah Schmitz. So he's going to do an interview with me beforehand and afterwards, and I'm hopefully going to have an engineer from the team who's not involved with it, who'll be able to just explain some of the stuff that's going on. It's a bit more nuanced. You don't fully understand everything that's happening. But yeah, it's an early start, but quite the idea of getting there in the dark. Yeah. But there's this place in Milton Keynes, just outside Milton Keynes, that there's this buzzing operation, and it's as many people as there are at track for the team are also in this room, so it's quite cool.
So is it Will and Hannah's job to kind of filter all of this information that they're getting from these 50-odd people?
It's different. So everyone has different roles. So there's different people doing different things. And I don't fully know until I experience it a bit more. But they are the ones the strategists, they're the ones that are going to make the call, so the buck rests on them. But as I said, there will have been days of conversation, so it'll be happening now. They'll be talking about China, what they're going to do, what are the tyre choices, when are the pit stops, how many pit stops, all of that stuff. They'll work out a plan. But in the heat of the moment, these people have to make these ballsy calls, and you don't know. Suddenly someone could smash into a wall. There's a red flag or a safety car. You've got to make those pretty immediately.
It's so interesting to me that you've got all of these people with all of their data, processing it all, making these incredibly complicated decisions, and they make a decision, and there is a chance that the driver just says, "Nah."
Yeah,
it's amazing. Just on feel, and it
does
happens
happen
quite a lot. That
no,
must
the
be...
tyres are fine.
Yeah,
you're wrong.
Yeah,
and I think I find that amazing that they just know if there's the slightest thing wrong or not wrong with the car. They're that experienced, obviously they've got it, but it can be a tiny thing. There's something not right, so you hear them say that.
They're all like the Princess and the Pea, basically.
That's a really good analogy, actually, because it is the tiniest thing, and they'll go, no, the telemetry all says it's fine, and they're like, no, there's something wrong, and sure enough, 3 laps long, later they're like, yeah, you're quite right. Bring box, bring the car in. I love that part of it.
Yeah. Just that kind of. Like just being at one,
that innate
with this
sense of
incredibly
this
complicated machine.
Yeah.
So, don't really want to do this, but we are doing it.
I know what's coming.
We're going to do our predictions for the Chinese Grand Prix. You can do yours. I've got mine written down, so I'm not going to change, but yours, please. So your podium.
So I'm going to go for Oscar Piastri for the win this time.
Oh,
yeah. So a bit of a shift.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah. And then
he did look quick, didn't he?
Yeah, I do fancy him to do it. I've got Norris second, and then on brand, I've got Max Verstappen third. That'd be my 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so we are.
You've got what have you got?
Almost exactly the same, but I've just got Norris winning again.
Okay.
Piastri second, Verstappen third.
I mean, that does feel like what the top 3 are going to be, unless something crazy happens. But
yeah, it's quite hard to see past those 3. I mean, obviously, Piastri messed up.
Yeah.
But the conditions are going to be a bit more.
I think I do fancy him. He looked quick, and he'll feel like he has a point to prove after the way things ended in front of his home crowd. He'll want to bounce back.
The big question really is how close will Red Bull be able to get to McLaren at the weekend, I think. Because you imagine they're going to be a bit further behind. I
think they were about half a second behind in testing, and I think about 0.2 in Melbourne, but I don't know whether the rain affected that. So it'd be interesting to see what the gap is. I mean, we'll find out as soon as they start practice. There's practice sessions and seeing what their race pace and what their qualifying pace is kind of like.
I sometimes get confused when I watch the practice.
Well, it is confusing because everyone's doing different things.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention to the timesheets. So you'll suddenly have
it's hard not to though, isn't it?
Oh my God, Hamilton's top. I'm going to put him on my podium.
Yes,
I'm not saying that's what happened.
No, I mean,
but what you want to look out for is when they're doing where they do long runs. So you do your long run. So they go out for a stint of a dozen laps, and you can see what that pace is then, and that's more
indicative
more indicative. It's a good comparison. Someone can do an empty fuel load, they call it showboating, or a big sponsor's turned up for this particular event. You're like, hello, let's
lovely fast car.
Carlos Sainz, second quicker than everyone else, or whatever it is. So
and the sponsors are like, have more money.
I'm not sure it ever works, hoodwinking like that, but they
must know.
It still happens. So it's quite weird the practice reading too much into it. And I know it as well, and I fell into the trap of doing my predictions off the back of what happened. Nonsense.
More for you. Right, you can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok, which is news to me. I've never been on TikTok. Have you been on TikTok?
Not my children scroll through their phone and show me clips.
You're 48. You shouldn't be on TikTok. But we are going to be on TikTok. We do want you to send in your predictions for the next race. So give us your 1, 2, 3. Have a look for us on Instagram stories. The account again is @theinsidetrack_podcast. And we could have had the Inside Track podcast, but we wanted the underscore in there. And you can also send in any questions or thoughts about the show within reason. Maybe we'll dedicate a future episode to your suggestions. Our email address is theinsidetrack@bbc.co.uk. So we'll see you at the same time next week to review race number 2, the Chinese Grand Prix. I've got to say, I'm happy with this. I'm delighted we got the new podcast up and running. In fact, I wouldn't be dead for quids.
Oh,
it's that easy. It's that easy, Matt.
Oh, that's absolutely. I actually, my mind's blank now. That's
you're learning.
incredible.
Yeah, you're learning things. Yeah.
Learning from the master.
Yeah, well, didn't want to say master, but you are right. Thanks very much for all your thoughts today, Matt. The Inside Track is funded and made by BBC Studios, which is a commercial company that is wholly owned by the BBC. It's produced by Nick Thompson. Video editing and social media is by Ebony D'Souza. James Cook is the creative director.